Hi, it's Liz from Heal at Home Pet Care, and welcome to today's PetWise Chat. So we just had one last week, and I just felt the need to do another chat, one to get myself back into the routine of answering your questions, and another one just to answer questions. I know people are home and they're around, and you may have some questions and your veterinarian is not as accessible, or maybe you're home and you're on the computer Googling a ton of things and you're just getting confused by the information you're getting. So I love doing these talks in real time where I can answer all your questions. And I wanted to go back a little bit. We had a question last week about a dog, what to use in a dog after exercise, after a long walk and they're sore. And just a few thoughts I had during the week after that conversation is also knowing the your pet's activity level and how much they can handle exercise-wise. So if you think of yourself, if you decide, oh, I haven't gone running in a few months, I'm gonna go out running today, you're not gonna start by going 5 miles. If you do, then you're an unusual person that you're able to do that, and you're probably gonna be sore afterwards, but most of us have to build up a tolerance to that. So if you think about your pet's age and their tolerance level to exercise, and if they are ready for a long walk or not, those things can help mitigate problems after a walk. So I just wanted to put that out there to give you something else to think about. And maybe don't push your pet so much if they're not really used to a lot of exercise. One thing I wanted to talk about today that is not quite pet related, but a little bit, is that I don't know if you can see, I have this mark that showed up right here between my eyes this morning. And I've had that show up before, and I thought, oh, the cat must have scratched me when I was sleeping, which he doesn't ever put his paws on my face, but that's what I thought. Or maybe I got a rash from something, or I didn't know what it was, but it doesn't rub off. It's not a scratch. It just showed up right here. And I had taken a traditional Chinese medicine human lecture on facial diagnosis. So there are doctors who do facial diagnosis, and they can look at your face and kind of give you an idea of maybe what kind of temperament you have, what kind of personality, what kind of health issues that you might have. And this area here is the spleen and pancreas. And then when you get up here, it's the liver. So I had some liver lines showing up, and they will go away usually, but liver is a sign of maybe like anxiousness, a little bit of anger, frustration. But this spleen one, I could feel this kind of thing starting a few days ago. And I'm putting that in the perspective of our pets because our weather patterns have been changing very rapidly here. They go, if you know the Sting song, all 4 seasons in one day, that's what we've been going through this weekend. It went through summer, fall, we had winter, we had some summer heat and sun, we had fall wind and changes in the wind patterns, we had dryness, we had some winter hail and a little bit of snow and wetness, and then we're back to kind of like a spring cold dampness. So everyone's GI is going a little bonkers right now. I have people texting me that their pets are not eating, their appetite's off, but they're okay otherwise. I know one of my dogs, she doesn't love to eat in the morning, so I just kind of leave her alone. And I felt my own stomach just kind of like right under, like under your rib kind of area. It's just felt like heavy for a few days, and I kind of feel hungry, but I don't feel like I want to eat. And it almost feels like I need to burp or something, but I can't. And then today this popped up. So I know that I need to nurture my GI. And unfortunately with our pets, we can't do facial diagnosis, but there are other things that turn up. I've seen cats where next to their ears, sometimes they'll show up with a little bald patch, symmetrical on both sides of their head, and that's a lymph system. And the lymph system is tied into our how the body processes toxins or things that it can't use. And usually at night, the lymph system, it's all around our body. There's lymph nodes all over the body in our pets and in us. And at night, the head releases a lot of things we don't need as we're sleeping, and it's in the head. So when I see cats that have that, I know that they need to strengthen their digestion and maybe be in a more calming area. And we just think of things, we talk it out based on the individual, but I know that that's a sign. And there are some facial things with pets, but they don't have the skin tones that we do, that you can really pick up on these things, and they don't really get the lines that we do. But I thought it was interesting. So when I came home after seeing appointments today, One of my clients gave me some parsley. So I don't do juicing usually because I like to eat the whole food and I like to cook my food, but I did do a juice of beets, apples, parsley, and celery. And those are all things that can help with digestion. So those are all things that your pet can get. You know, you can have cooked apples. There's pectin in applesauce and cooked apples. Celery, beets are really good for digestion, and then parsley is good for digestion also. And the other thing right now that we talked about a little bit is dandelion, and that's outside right now. And I really wanted to stop at the store and get some dandelion greens before I came home, but with this whole virus thing, I didn't feel comfortable. So I'm just going to go outside and pick some. I was going to pick some dandelion, but my neighbor is putting some kind of chemical down today, and the chemicals are flying in the wind. So maybe I'll wait on that, or just wash them really good afterwards. But I'm hoping that maybe I'm going to watch this line and see if it goes away after I had this little juice burst. So we had some questions come in. I had some email/text questions. And one of them was about a dog with some bladder issues. And she's an older lab, and she has had bladder issues where she leaks at night, and it's been getting more and more. More and more chronic. She wakes up and she'll be soaking wet sometimes, and she doesn't even know that she's urinating. So what we tried for her is this bladder support, and it's made by Nature's Way, and it's called Nature's Way Urinary with Cranberry. And I had seen this dog a few months ago, and this is what we started her on, but I just got a text because she had been doing well on this. But the owner wanted to know, is this okay to keep giving this product? Is it safe? So I had to go back, and I just wanted to re-familiarize myself with the ingredients, and just reading from the ingredients. So it has cranberry fruit concentrate. So cranberry and blueberries are two foods that help the bladder in warding off bacteria. So it won't prevent an infection, but it will make the bladder wall kind of slippery so that if there is an infection, it will not attach to the bladder wall and they can just urinate it out. So that's where that comes in. Cleavers. So cleavers are a plant that should start coming out in the spring around now, and they're a very sticky plant. They almost look like an umbrella spokes without the fabric part around them, and when you touch them, it sticks to your clothes. So it has the aerial parts of the cleavers, which means the above ground parts. And cleavers are for moistening, and they are known to be good for bladder, and they're pretty benign, so that's an okay thing to use. Corn silk. So this to me stands out as a urinary treatment. So corn silk is very soothing to the bladder. So it will, if the bladder is inflamed or has any kind of chronic inflammation, it tones it down and soothes it. It has dandelion aerial parts, so the above ground parts of the dandelion, which are good for, they're really good for liver support and can be good for kidney support. So that probably is not harmful, and it may help a little bit. Then there's marshmallow root, which is a soothing and mucilage kind of thing. So there's slippery, if you think of the bladder. So you're moistening, and the bladder is a wet organ. It's actually, it's not an organ, it's a sac that holds fluid until it's ready to leave the body. So marshmallow root will probably help soothe and moisten, probably the urinary tract itself. And then there's golden seal, which are aerial parts of golden seal, and that's known as an antibiotic. So I don't, this dog might be prone to more bladder infections if they're wet there, and it's a female, so when they squat, they're probably more prone to having their body closer to the ground, and maybe an infection can get up that way. There's nothing in here, but so this is a dog, so this won't hurt this dog, and it was helping her. So I would say continue giving it on a daily basis. This is also a capsule, so I'd really recommend opening the capsule and putting it in a little bit of water and putting that in their food, because that's going to get some of these constituents to really open up. Like the marshmallow will start getting a little bit slimy and gooey in the water before it hits the GI tract. Same with the corn silk, it'll kind of just activate it a little bit. But there's nothing in here. This dog to me also sounds like it needs something to strengthen the bladder and to strengthen the muscles. And for me, I think of comfrey leaf infusions. And I know we did try this with this dog, and she seemed to pee more because comfrey leaf is also very kind of slimy and moist, and it probably caused her to kind of go to the bathroom more, but I think of it as something that can firm up muscles. So I would say the answer to this question is yes, you can keep giving this long term. There's nothing in here that would be harmful. So as long as it's helping, you can try it. And then I would also think about trying something else. Unfortunately for dogs, you can't do things that people would do when they are losing control of their bladder muscles, which are things like certain exercises with Kegel stones, I guess they are. It's really, you can't really get your dog to do those kinds of exercises, or it'd be very hard. You could try to tell them about it. Maybe they'll know. Some dogs are very smart, but that would be hard to do those exercises. But also walking, maybe just gentle exercise and gentle walking. And there are some acupoints that you can use in that area that might help tone that area. Okay, so let's see. The next question that came in this week is, let me just find it, the email, text question. Let me just search it up. So this one came in this week, and it is about okay, well, the general gist of it was they sent me a picture of a homemade bug repellent recipe that they had seen and they were using. And it had, I believe, eucalyptus and lemongrass, and then they would put it in a carrier oil. So that was something online that they saw, and they go walking and hiking with their dog a lot. So they wanted to make something more natural. So this is an interesting discussion because is natural better? You have to think about, first what I think about is the risk factor. Are you walking in an area where your pet is prone to ticks? I'm assuming if you're hiking, your concern is mostly about ticks. Things like mosquitoes, you can use these bug repellents also for mosquitoes and other bugs. Is your pet at risk for mosquitoes? So if they're inside all the time, are mosquitoes coming in the house? Yes, they can. How frequent and how often do they come in? And for mosquitoes, what we worry about, sometimes they can get certain worms from a mosquito bite, but really it's the heartworm parasite that we worry about. And it's coming on spring. So what is your pet's risk to heartworm infection? So that means knowing the life cycle of the mosquito. And it has to be a certain certain amount of days over about 50 degrees for that female mosquito to actually be breeding. And then that female mosquito would have to actually be carrying the heartworm disease, and it would have to land on your pet and bite them and transmit the disease. And it would have to first get the disease from another animal within 200 feet of your pet. So, what are the chances of your pet getting heartworm and being near a dog? Right now at these isolation times, I'd say we're all pretty distant from each other. There are no real doggy play dates going on. I don't know how far your yard is from other people, but it's still a good idea. Mosquitoes are vectors for certain things, so I think it's a good idea to keep mosquitoes off of your pets. And then if we're talking about ticks, what is the life cycle of the tick? And knowing that life cycle is really helpful when you're trying to prevent them from getting on your pet. So we're going to spring season, so the adults are getting hungry and they're coming out and they want to eat. And any babies that are coming out are first looking for smaller hosts, like a mouse. And then as they get bigger, they look for bigger and bigger hosts, like chipmunks, deer, dogs, people. So the adults are looking for bigger hosts to situate themselves on, and they're coming out now when it's warmer out, and they will come out on a cold day if the sun is out. It's also, if you're walking near brush, they're usually not in the woods, but they're on the edge of the woods. So if you're walking with your pet, stay away from the edges of things. Stay in either mowed grass or get into the woods. And just check your pet regularly. If you have a pet with long hair or fur, it can be really hard. My dogs have short hair, so it's easy for me to see if there's a tick that gets on them initially. And then natural. So using a natural bug repellent, is this a good thing? It's hard to say. So what does natural mean? Natural bug repellents are usually using a carrier oil and an essential oil. So an essential oil is not really natural. You've taken thousands of pounds of a plant material and you've distilled it down to its essence, and you've taken one kind of part of it and you've made it basically into a medicine. Essential oils are really good as cleaners also because they can repel and get rid of bacteria. So, I don't know how natural that is when you're taking that much stuff and putting it into an oil. However, you only need a very small amount of the oil. And what's the alternative? That would be using a chemical that is an insecticide. So insecticide, the last part of that word is side, and that means death. So it kills insects. So if it's killing insects, they say that most of these things are okay for mammals because insects are invertebrates, and these chemicals specifically target invertebrates. But who's to say that it's not? They can be like nervicides where they're killing the nervous system of the insects. So who's to say that's not getting into your pet somehow? So I worry about these things. I also know things like those topical front lines that you put on, it gets absorbed systematically through the skin and gets into the body. There were studies showing that those could make your pet prone to bladder cancer. So certain breeds are prone to bladder cancer. And then if you add this topical thing onto them consistently, they could be prone to bladder cancer. So you want to minimize your pet's exposure to chemicals. Basically, that's the gist of it. So you want to be smart about where you walk them and their exposure to these outside things. And then you also want to be smart about what you're using on them and how often you're doing it. So the anti-bug homemade recipe, you would use a carrier oil. So usually what I do, so the question is this one with eucalyptus and lemongrass? I'm just going to double check that while we're talking. I think it was lemongrass. Are those effective? And there are a lot of studies showing essential oils and how they can target certain insects and how they do that. So there are certain components in these plant oils. And what they also have found that using these plant oils, when they make the essential oil, in some studies, the essential oil itself would have a certain amount of repellent against an insect, but what really repelled them was the leftover plant material that was spent after making the oil, and that was really what was repelling them. So it's interesting that we're taking this one essential part, and yet all the rest of it has something in it that's being useful. I remember reading a study once that the US Army was actually using, I believe it was citronella, as an insect repellent for their soldiers. And it didn't last a long time. They have to reapply it frequently, but they felt like it was safer than using DEET. So DEET, D-E-E-T, is a chemical that has been manufactured and highly tested against the use of against insects. DEET is considered somewhat harmful for the skin, and really what the studies are showing that it's more harmful if you put it on mucous membranes, so in the nose or the mouth or in the eyes, and if it gets into the body. As a barrier on clothing, it can be really helpful. So maybe what you do is take a DEET product and spray it on a bandana and put it on your pet, or spray it on their harness and put that to the side and let it sit for a little bit and dry, and then put it on your pet, and that might be somewhat of a repellent. What we worry about with our pets is they're always ingesting things or licking themselves. So if you put a harness or bandana on, if any of that chemical gets onto them, if they scratch or ingest it, that would be harmful for them. If they ingest an essential oil, it can disrupt their gut bacteria, so you don't want them ingesting that either. So, another option is putting these things on them and then giving them a bath afterwards, which then what I would say is then don't use the repellent. You can just give them a bath afterwards, and then any of the ticks and things would probably be washed off. Fleas would be washed off. there's no mosquitoes. So what I do is I take a used bottle, so this was from something that we had, and I fill it with a carrier oil, and I use sesame oil only because that's usually what I have on hand. In some studies, coconut oil has been shown to have somewhat of a minimal anti-insect repellent property to it. So you might want to use like fractionated coconut oil, and then that would like up level your anti-bug oil. So what I do is I use geranium oil, and only because when I first started looking into this a few years ago, it's an oil I had on hand, and I'm like, well, let me use this. So I use geranium oil, and I've made this kind of concoction where I put this in, and then I use a dropper full, or sometimes two, of geranium oil and put it in this and mix it up, and then I'll use this for my pets. And what I do is I just put it on my hands, I rub it, and then I rub it on them so that they will have it on their collars, they have it on their underbelly, on their arms, just on the undersides and on their neck. Oh, smells good. The places that the bugs will usually go to. If you're worried about mosquitoes, you can put it more towards their head and their ears. And for ticks, definitely on their arms. So most studies have shown that there are certain oils that are better at repelling insects than others. And eucalyptus is not really one of the ones that is listed as a high repellent. When I think of eucalyptus, I think more of the lungs. So it's used as a lung opener. It opens the airways. So just breathing that in, if you have a pet with lung issues, you can maybe use eucalyptus a little bit in some oil and just have them smell it. Again, I would probably get the whole plant and use dried eucalyptus and use it as a mist, you know, in a humidifier kind of situation. I wouldn't really use the oil for that. I'm only recommending using oil for this bug repellent because it beats the alternative to using an insecticide that goes internally into your pet. So the eucalyptus was part of the question. That's not really one that's used quite often or that is shown in studies to really repel insects. And the lemongrass does have some properties of repelling, but it's usually used in coordination, and it's a little bit lower down on the list. So the oils that are higher on the list that have higher repelling qualities are things like citronella, which we know from citronella candles. If you've been outside on a summer night and you burn a citronella candle, it keeps the mosquitoes away. Geranium is high on the list, and I can tell you this oil that I make works. When I put it on, I rarely see any ticks on my dogs, and if I do, the ticks are just kind of sitting on their skin, and you could tell they don't really want to be there, but there's something attracting them, but there's something repelling them at the same time. So it gives me time to pick them off and get them off of my dog. Okay, so we have citronella, geranium, and cedarwood. So cedarwood is high on the list also as something that you can use for your pet. And I actually, someone gifted me a manufactured commercial product of, it was cedarwood. It's a cedarwood oil, so it's kind of like what I made, but it was more expensive. And it had cedarwood, and I use that on my pets sometimes. So I'll just spray it on them, and that actually works really well. Also, I've had good luck with that in high tick-infested areas. So I would recommend really those top three: citronella, geranium, cedarwood. And just be aware that some pets have a skin sensitivity to some essential oils. There are some studies on neem oil, N-E-E-M, which is a plant that is usually found more in India, but you'll see it used a lot here. And the neem plant can be very irritating to skin. You'll see it sometimes recommended if you Google online, if you're trying to get rid of something like a ringworm or any kind of skin issues like fungal issues. You'll see neem mentioned for people and for pets, and it can be a really kind of caustic to the skin. So you might want to stay away from that kind of product. What neem can be used for, what it is used for back in its home country, is they'll burn the plant like a sage stick, and that will repel all the bugs in the area. So the flying insects, it'll keep them away. So it's almost like, again, on a summer night, if you're making a bonfire, it keeps all the bugs away because that smoke keeps them away. And then if you add some kind of an herb to it, you're kind of like smudging the area, and it repels them. So that extra burning of an insecticide, or of a plant material, can actually keep the bugs away. Sometimes if you light incense outside, you can also keep the bugs away, but it doesn't always repel them. And when you're lighting incense, you're actually lighting essential oils, because those sticks are made from essential oils. So just be aware. I used to burn incense when I first started doing yoga, and I thought I liked the smell, and I do. There's something very attractive about the smell. But when I stopped using it so often, I realized that when I did burn it, I could feel it in my lungs. Those essential oils really do get into your lungs. So just be careful if you're burning an incense stick, know what it's made of, and maybe burn it outside. If you're going to do something inside, you can use a smudge stick. That's a better way of using those oils. So I hope that answers that question. So really what I would do is first just know the life cycle of the insect or that you're trying to repel, and know your pet if they have any sensitivities or any allergies, and know what kind of exposure that they're going to be having, and try to minimize the exposure. So if you can put all those 3 things into place, and then if you want to make your own oil, which I do recommend trying, it's pretty easy and it's cost effective, then I would do again, I like the geranium and the cedarwood. I think I just like the smell of that, but citronella also. Also, one other thing about that, I like the geranium because it's also in a class of oil that can be used in cooking. So there are a class of oils like rose oil, lemon oil, geranium, vanilla. So there's a vanilla an oil from the vanilla bean. Those are all in a class of kind of more edible plants, and I kind of like that the geranium is in that plant. And also I'm a gardener, and there is a geranium plant that you can grow that you might be familiar with, and they make all different types. I go to a garden show every year at Rutgers University, and they have an entire table set up of different kinds of geranium. And I just love going through it. It's like chocolate geranium, strawberry geranium, lemon, lime, I don't even know, but they have all kinds of geranium, and they each smell like what they're called. So imagine having a plant that smells like chocolate. It's pretty cool, but it's from the oil that's in the plant. So they've been able to breed a geranium plant and get all these different smells out of it. And if you hang that outside, or even like right inside your house, that's a repellent. So you could try something like that. The reason why it repels is once the leaf is injured. So if an insect lands on a leaf and tries to eat it, the plant responds by emitting this oil, and it repels the bug, so it keeps it safe. So it's kind of cool. So yeah, I would recommend making your own oil. You would have to do it in some kind of bottle and rub it on. And if you want to make a spray of it, it's a little bit harder. It doesn't last as long as it does in the carrier oil. And the spray probably will have to be reapplied more frequently. You probably do that. I don't know what kind of carrier. It's probably not going to last as long in a spray bottle. But you could use like an oil with maybe some kind of alcohol with it, as a carrier with it. And just so that when you make your own bug repellent, you're going to have to reapply this every hour or so. So every hour that you're outside with your pet in the area where the bugs are, just reapply a little bit of this oil. And that will make sure that the bugs know that it's on there, because it wears off pretty quickly. Okay, so I hope that helps you. And if you have any more questions, let me know. I will set up another talk soon. We'll probably I might do one before the end of the month, but definitely in June we'll have our next talk, and hopefully this will be gone. Okay. See you soon, everyone. Bye.